Hello, we'll start in a minute. We are waiting for people to join. Well, hello to all. Welcome to our first webinar from the fall of 2023. We are organizing this webinar on behalf of WAPOR. We are part of the Educations Committee. The chair is Chase Harrison, and the former chair and still member of the committee is Claire Duran. We also have Gary Langer in the Educations Committee, Ali Negesan, Michael Nietzsche, Michael Tragot, Rima Sinike, and Yasha Schwangam. It is one of the objectives of our Educations Committee to have webinars showing cases of research and methodologies all over the world. And this is one of the reasons why we've invited Angelo Cozzubo. Angelo Cozzubo is a data scientist at the NORC University of Chicago and a Ph.D. student in survey and data science at the University of Maryland. He holds a master's degree with honors in computational analysis and public policy from the University of Chicago, and a bachelor summa cum laude in economics from PUCP. Angelo has published journal articles and book chapters regarding inequality, poverty, crime, and public policy. He has served as a consultant and advisor in the public sector and international organizations and in research positions in various think tanks. Currently, he's a technical advisor for the Peruvian National Statistical Office, where he has developed essential contributions as a small area vulnerability map for targeting social policy. His topics of interest are survey, applied microeconomics, data science, and public policy. It's a pleasure, Angelo, to have you in this webinar. And it's great to see how many people have shown interest in this topic and in this webinar. We had more than 340 people signing in. For those who couldn't reach it, we will be then sending a video so that you can listen to the webinar again or for the first time. And first, we will have a presentation from Angelo, and after that, we will have a session of Q&As. You are invited in the session of Q&As to raise your hand and just talk, or if you prefer, you can put the questions in the chat or in the Q&A. Well, that's all. We are here to listen to Angelo, so I'm turning over to him. Thanks a lot to all for participating.
Thanks, Constanza. Thanks to all the WAPOR staff for the invitation, for having me here, presenting these interesting topics of hard-to-survey population. Thanks to all the attendees, participants that are watching now, or that will be watching afterwards the recording. And I want to take maybe 40-45 minutes for this presentation. I'm going to give a broad overview of the idea of hard-to-survey populations with a focus on 3 specific methods and more in depth into one, where I will present a case study that we did at NORC. It's a Brazilian study for the Brazilian population in forced labor. And I will conclude with some takeaways, and we will open to the Q&As, of course. I'm happy to try to answer all of your questions. There's a lot to disentangle in this topic. There's a lot of literature that is moving. It's a very interesting topic, and it's a very sensitive topic. Many of the population we study with this. So thanks a lot for having me here. With that, I will start. Please, if my connection gets bumpy at some point or I lose connection, let me know so I can go 5 seconds before to what I was saying, so I don't lose that idea. Okay, so first, I want to start defining what are hard-to-survey populations for us and thinking in the survey context. Right, so let me slides. Okay. So what are hard-to-survey populations? And this, I'm putting this image. This is the image of one of the most important books in the topic. Hard-to-survey populations are specific populations that present different challenges that make them hard to survey, as the name indicates. But what does it mean hard to survey? Or what challenge could we see when we try to survey an individual? They could be hard to sample, for example. They're rare populations, for example, people in homeless situations. They could be hard to identify. We don't know the characteristics they have. We want to do a survey, for example, on men who have sex with men in some conservative country, and they don't want to identify themselves as that. So they are hidden by stigma, their sensitivity regarding this trait, or they are motivated to misreport some action. Maybe they are hard to reach, and that's the one we will focus also today. They are difficult to contact. They do not want to be identified, maybe because they fear any retaliation, or there may be barriers to locate them, for example, undocumented immigrants. They be hard to persuade. There may be populations that it's very hard for them very hard for an enumerator to make them fill a survey or answer a survey. And this we see for example, in high-income households, and we are seeing this more and more with the non-response rates that are increasing in time. We see that in the WAPOR latest reports on non-response. Or they could be hard to interview per se. So they could have some health impairments. They could have some language difficulties that make them hard to interview. So now I want to focus on the hard-to-reach populations. That's the one we will investigate with this methodology. So hard-to-reach populations, as we said, as populations that are difficult to contact, that do not want to be identified, or that have different barriers to access them. So what a specific challenge, how can we disentangle this challenge? First, and this is the main statistical issue for this population, I would say, we don't have a list, we don't have a frame. Like with traditional sampling, we usually have a sampling frame, for example, a census, or a registry of business, or something that we can use to draw the sample from. So it's a complete list of all the individuals that could fall in this category. For hard-to-reach population, we don't have a list. We don't have this sampling frame in the technical jargon. Also, they may have high mobility of the individuals, and that usually happens. For example, in the mining sector in Brazil, we saw that happening a lot. They were moving from place to place, searching for short-term jobs. They could be hard to locate in the territory. The barriers we may face for this territory, there may be restricted areas, there could be dangerous areas, or it could be remote. For the case I will present, we have 3 of them. It was restricted, dangerous, and remote. And some examples of these populations could be nomadic or displaced workers, undocumented immigrants, and forced labor victims that are exactly the ones we will see in the applied case I will show you at the end of the presentation. So with all these traits, all these challenges, we can ask ourselves, why do we need to investigate this hard-to-reach population? Can we not rely on the classical methods and just study the general population and say something for these groups with general traditional sampling? Why do we need to investigate these specific types of population? Well, they are usually historically underrepresented groups. And this can interest us in different ways. First, in a more pure academic side, we may have an academic interest to have evidence of this group. We don't know nothing about men who have sex with men in Peru, for example. We don't know nothing about people who use different types of drugs in Mexico or in other countries. So we may have an academic interest on that subpopulation, depending on what we do our research, what we investigate. And the other is that we may have actual concerns about these populations because they are usually vulnerable. So we might be concerned about safety and well-being of these groups, and we might be concerned about the risk they may pose for other groups, depending on which population we are researching. they usually are marginalized. They have a marginalized status that is associated with stigma or fear of legal repercussions that makes them hard to reach. And also investigating these groups may improve the representativeness and generalizability of our findings and interventions. For example, if we're trying to design a poverty alleviation technique, we may conduct a traditional survey, a household survey. In a household survey, we go to households. So by definitions, we won't reach any homeless individual. And those homeless individuals are the ones facing one of the worst types of poverty. So investigating this hard to reach population is very important in that regard. If we need to investigate that group of individuals that for designing an accurate, a precise, a tailored intervention, and it's my last point, these are individuals who usually need tailored public points. So for you to have a better sense of what types of population can we include in this, I'm gonna tell you some examples. These groups might include, for example, drug users and drug dealers, sex workers, victims of sexual assaults, sexual harassments or domestic violence, perpetrators of these acts too, also sexual minorities, like the example I was mentioning, men who have sex with men, also people with some stigmatizing medical condition or that have gone through a socially sanctioned procedure, for example, abortions, and also people who have committed some type of crime, for example, driving under influence, and that's one of the examples of concerning about the risk that this group may impose to others, or individuals who are failing to pay, for example, child support. So those are types of population that have been investigated with these methods for hard to reach population. Okay, so after the definition, I want to go specifically to the methods that we use to investigate hard to reach population. So I'm gonna mention 3 of the main methods to do this. I'm gonna go in depth into one. So we have different methods for hard to reach population. What's the main objective of this? As I said before, we don't have a list, we don't have a frame, we cannot do traditional sampling. So that's our first challenge. So our objective is to produce a statistically sound estimate, accurate estimates and unbiased estimates for hard to reach population. And for this population, mostly our objectives will be to estimate any prevalence, any trait, for example, how many of the drug users have some health condition, some mental health condition, how many of the minor workers are in forced labor, and we also may want to estimate the size of this population, how many individuals are in this group. So the techniques that we present help us in both ways. So these techniques could be based on special models that could be appended to traditional surveys, or use administrative data, or use pseudo or non-probabilistic samples. This could also involve the combination of different sources of data and different methods. And I'm gonna go through a little bit of the methods that aim to recover population size estimates too. So we cannot only say, for example, 40% of individuals are in this condition. We can also say there are 6,000, 10,000 individuals in this population. For example, one pressing question would be, how many homeless individuals are in the city of Lima? That's, for example, a population size estimation. Alternatively, we can use pseudo or non-probability methods that aim to recover representative estimates of the size and the prevalence of this hard-to-reach population. The 3 methods I'm going to go through today are these 3: network scale-up method, mark recapture, and one of the generalization of mark recapture, and the respondent-driven sampling and some of the extensions. And I will take more time on the latter. There are other methods to investigate hard to reach population that I'm not gonna go today, but you can check it in the book I put in the first slide. For example, time location sampling or indirect sampling. But these 3 methods are very used in the literature. So I'm gonna go with the first one, that is the network scale-up method. So what's or the ENSOM? So what's the main intuition behind the ENSOM? For the ENSOM, we will use information on some known populations, individuals that we know who they are, what's the size of them that we have in some other register. For example, policemen, number of men in one area, etc. So we use that known population group to estimate the size of a hidden population. So how will we do that? We will ask respondents, we will conduct a traditional survey, and this is one of the advantages of the ENSOM, that we can append these questions to a traditional survey. We will ask respondents about their personal network. How many individuals do you know? How big is your network? In a probability sum. So we will ask these types of questions. How many colleagues you have, how many friends, how many family members you have. So we have an idea of how many people you know. So that's the part that we append to the question. And from that personal network, we can estimate the network, the hidden population network. So we can have accurate estimates for each respondent personal network, size, and the number on the network that are part of the hidden population. So how do we do this specifically with the ENSOM? We will extrapolate the information from the sample to estimate the size and the prevalence of the hidden population. How does this look? There are two types of ENSOM, basically. The reference ENSOM, that is the first one, and the summation ENSOM. So I'm going to go first with the reference ENSOM. So we're conducting a general survey, we're conducting a household survey, for example, and we will append these questions at the end or at some point of the questionnaire. And we will ask the individual, how many persons named Jorge do you know? How many policemen, for example, do you know in your city? And these two populations, the individuals named Jorge or the number of policemen in the city, we know them. We know that the size of them. We can have the census data and check everybody that is named Jorge, or we can have the administrative record from police stations and know how many policemen are there in the city. So those are the known networks that we have a number from other data that we can use. So from those administrative data, we know the size of those populations, and we can estimate the personal network of that individual. Okay, this individual knows 200 persons all over because he knows more or less 5 policemen. We can estimate the size of the personal network. And then with that personal network size, we will also ask about the hidden population. For example, how many men who have sex with men do you know? And he said, for example, 3. And then we can use the weight of the personal network size to compute the size of this hidden population. That's one type, the reference ENSOM. And the other type is the summation ENSOM. It's similar in nature, but we will ask directly how many people do you know. We won't ask for policemen or people named Jorge. We are directly ask how many friends do you have, how many colleagues do you have, how many family members do you have. So we have an estimate of the size of the personal network. And with that, then we make the same question. How many men who have sex with men do you know? And we use that size of the personal network to weight that estimate. So the main idea of the ENSOM is to know the size of the network of the individual we are interviewing and use that one as a weight to estimate the size of the hidden population. So what is important is that an ENSOM model can be easily appended to a survey questionnaire. It's a way that we extrapolate information from the sample to estimate the general population. So some of the applications of ENSOM, some populations that have been investigated with ENSOM are mortality victims in earthquakes, heroin users, heavy drugs users in general, men who have sex with men, drug and alcohol users, groups at risk of HIV/AIDS, etc., etc. So if you see the types of questions you make at ENSOM do not reveal personal traits. You just ask, how many of these do you know? So we could estimate without getting confidential information. So that's why it's a very useful method, very easy to implement. The next method I want to present, that's the first one, ENSOM, it's the mark recapture, or its generalization that it's called multiple system estimation. So what's the idea of mark recapture? Mark recapture is a technique that comes from biology. So the intuition behind this is that we will combine different lists of individuals to identify members that overlaps between lists. And with that, we can estimate the size of a hidden population. So we will select multiple samples. We will make multiple captures occasions and read across all our captures occasions to measure the overlaps, to see which individuals we have captured more than once. And with that, we will estimate the abundance parameter. That's the jargon of this technique. That's the estimation of the population size. So In biology, what you usually do, you put some traps, and then the species you are trying to collect, for example, a guinea pig in here, the guinea pig gets in the trap, you put a mark on them, you release them, and then you wait, and again, you will get another guinea pig and another guinea pig, and at some point, you will recapture one that has a mark. So that's a recapture. So in our case, we are investigating human populations, so we cannot mark individuals. So for human subjects, what we will do, a mark means collecting personal information data. So we will try to collect different lists of individuals and see if in this list, individuals from list A are also present in list B or also present in list C. So those will be our overlapping, our recaptures. And with that, we can estimate the size of the hidden population. There are several modifications and extensions to these methods. For example, open and closed populations, when we allow migration or we don't allow migration and assume that the population is fixed in a territory. And we can also include list heterogeneity. That means that the lists are of different quality and not all the data is of the same accuracy. So a basic way to conduct the mark recapture is that we go and sample individuals from different sampling occasions. We can go to different venues and try to get individuals at different time points in time. That would be like a time location sampling. We can do a household sampling and see if in the household sampling we get some of the individuals that we want. Or we can do as a respondent-driven sampling, that is the one I'm going to show you. So now you see that the methods are overlaps. And with those different captures occasions, we will check if individuals appear in more than one occasion. So those will be our recaptures. But mark recapture has been generalized to and has a broader literature that is now called multiple system estimation. So in multiple system estimation, that is the generalization of mark recapture, we allow for secondary data. And that's very useful in the case of human subject study, because we can go, for example, to NGOs and ask them, do you have a list of people that are in homeless situation? We can go to law enforcement records and say, do you have a list of individuals who committed this type of crime? Or we can ask to village leader for local information and check individuals who appear in more than one list. So multiple system estimation allow us to include not only our data collection that we had in the previous point, but also information from auxiliary sources like NGOs, administrative records, local information. So one clear example of how we can use mark recapture or MSE. In Peru, during the armed conflict, we had documented 25,000 deaths. The Truth and the Reconciliation Commission documented 25,000 deaths. So those are individuals that appear in any list that mentioned they were killed during these years. After an MSE analysis by the Human Rights Data Analysis Group, the mark recapture estimation they do by combining individuals who appear in more than one list estimated that there were actually 7,000 deaths during this time. So that's one way we can use mark recapture or multiple system estimation. Okay, so those are the two methods I wanted to go quickly. That is the NSOM and the MSE. And now we're gonna get a little more in depth in the respondent-driven sampling, and of course a little bit of extension. That's what I'm putting the class in there. So what's respondent-driven sampling? And this is the method I will present you on a case afterwards. The intuition behind this method is that you start with a convenience sample. You start with individuals that you known from previously, from a public office, from contacting them with non-probabilistic methods. And from that start of the convenient samples, you use incentive. So the respondents will redirect you to other members in that target population. For example, I'm going to try to put the laser. Here we have a seed, right? So the first individuals are called seeds. So I have a list of, for example, individuals in homeless situation. So how I reach them? Well, I contact public offices, shelters, etc. So I have a list of individuals that are in homeless situation. And then I will ask them to please tell me where I can find other individuals in that situation so I can interview them. That's the main idea of RDS. That's where the name comes from. The respondent is the one that is driving, pushing the sampling mechanism. So it's a strategy for accessing, recruiting, and studying the hard to reach or hidden populations through pseudo probability sampling. So And this starts with a non-probabilistic sampling, and then it becomes a pseudo-probability sampling because we will create sampling weights. So how's the process work? We start with a convenience samples of individuals in the target population. That is, those are the seeds. So this is the start of this tree. And these individuals will refer to other individuals in the target population, and we call that branching. So that homeless individual that we identify from the shelter, he will mention other individuals in homeless situation, and that's how it starts to branch. So a subset of those nominees are selected randomly. He may know 15, 20, 30 individuals in homeless situation. We will select a subset of them for interviewing. And this process occurs several times. So as you see, this branching occurs more than once. So we start with one individual, they mention 5. So we select these 5, and these 5, they will mention others and others and others and so on. So that's the process of waves. There's more than one wave. And it usually involves monetary incentives, simple or double. Simple incentives, if you fill the survey, we give you a monetary incentive. Double means if you fill the survey, I give you an incentive. But if you bring someone that fills the survey, I will get you another incentive because you brought someone. So how the estimation part works. We will approximate sampling weights to use as a traditional sample, and that involves Markov chain theory. So I'm not going to go a lot in detail on the methodological part, but the idea is that we do a random walk through these individuals in the network. There are several estimators in the literature. The first one's Salmanik Hecatron, and there are newer estimators, for example, the Thompson and Vincent's, that is called the new estimator for network sampling. So a little bit, how does this work in the field? So this will be one of our branches. So if you have heard about snowball sampling, it would be very similar to snowball sampling. So one person here will recruit 2 individuals, for example. No? So I got 1 individual in homeless situation and said, please contact me with other 2 people in this situation. And these 2 individuals are interviewed, and then they contact 2 other individuals in homeless situation, and they contact 2 other individuals, and so on and so on. So this first individual will be the seed, and this will be the referrals, and this will be wave 1, this will be wave 2, this will be wave 3, etc., etc. So it's very similar to snowball sampling. The snowball sampling is called like that because it's like a snowball that it grows bigger and bigger as it rolls down the hill. However, we know that snowball sampling has problems and it's biased because people tend to recruit other individuals of themselves and not randomly. So if we start with 1 and let the snowball grow alone, we may be only in one part of the network and don't see the complete network. So how do we overcome this with RDS? RDS selects a large number of seats. We don't have 1 seat, we have more than 1 seat. In our study, we have 180. So for example, here there are 6 different seats. So we don't rely on 1 seat to construct the network, we rely on different seats. So every person at the top would be a seat, so that we try to ensure that the seats are different. They are different gender, they are different age groups, they have different characteristics of whatever we know from the hidden population that we're trying to estimate. So the idea is that they branch out. We know that every individual will refer to other persons that are in a similar situation. Men will refer to men, women will refer to women, older individuals may refer to older individuals. So we want variety in the seats, and we want to put different seats in different parts of the network. So that's one thing of the RDS. And the other one is that each study participant is limited in the number of participants they can recruit afterwards. So here, for example, we are only allowing 2 individuals per referral. So if I may know 50 other individuals in forced labor situation, but I will allow only 2 to be the referrals. So that's one part of the RDS, how the branching works. So as the waves go by, subsequently wave by wave, and the population starts to grow, the initial sample that was a convenience sample diverges. So what the theory tells us is that at the end, with many waves, the final sample do not depend on the initial seeds. So we are eliminating this dependence on the convenience sample. So ideally, the RDS recruitment stops when the final wave is shown to be independent from these original seeds, and there's no new information gained by sampling more and more response. What we have to do is to track very carefully this referral in order to permit the researchers to assess and adjust the biases that we may be seeing in the fieldwork. So that's part of the fieldwork. This is like a responsive or adaptive type of sampling that we have to make corrections in the field all the time if we see that the network is going some way or some other way and it's getting a little bit biased. So a little bit of the assumptions. I'm going to go fast in this one. We can go back in the question. The estimation relies heavily on the Markov chain theory. We assume that we have a random walk over the population network. We assume there's a population of individuals connected, that they know each other, and we're doing a random walk around them. We start with a pre-chosen node, those are the seeds, and move to a neighbor with an uniform probability, and then it's repeated and repeated and repeated. That's the way. And with a large enough sample size, the inclusion probabilities are proportional to the network size of each individual. Those are the first types of estimators from RDS. So some of the assumptions here that we have to make for the RDS is that the entire study populations is one single network that is connected. That means there is a link that exists between any two individuals. We can go from one individual to the other for at least one path, through at least one path. There are the links in the population are not directional. That means they are symmetrical. If I know you, you know me. Sampling, of course, with replacements, individuals could be sampled more than once. And respondents can accurately report their network size. How many individuals in this network do you know? And that recruitment of the referrals occurs randomly from these personal networks. Okay, so how does this network data starts to be constructed? What's the source of this data? So the data to map the overlaps in this population, to check the links and everything, comes from two sources. The first one is unique codes on referral coupons. I'm going to show you a coupon in the next slide, but what we do in the fieldwork is we give coupons to the individuals. So each individual will, for example, I'm a seed, I fill the survey, I complete the survey, all the questions, everything. And at the end, the enumerator will ask me, okay, how many other individuals in homeless situation you know? I say, okay, I know 10. So those are my nominees that are here. I know in here 8. We'll stick to the graph. Okay, I know 8 other individuals in homeless situation. And from those 8, we allow the software, in our case, we use Survey CTO, to select randomly from those 8, to select only 3. So we select only 3 referrals, and we say, okay, we have selected from these 8, these 3 individuals. So these 3 individuals, you have to give them this coupon. When you give them this coupon, they can come to us to fill a survey, and we'll give them a monetary incentive for filling the survey, and we'll give you another incentive for bringing them here. So how this coupon works? They are QR codes. They are QR codes unique for each respondent referral. So every individual that mentions another one have a unique QR code, and these QR codes are activated in our live Survey CTO database. And that's very important because that protects us against being deceived. What we see in the fieldwork is that people try to come to the interview more than once from in different stages. They try to mention another individual. They try to give, oh, but you didn't select my best friend, and I want to give the coupon to my best friend because you're going to give money to him or her. So those are different types of deceiving that we may see and that will mess up our randomization. And we have seen in the field, people try to reuse a coupon, people trying to photocopy the coupon, people trying to cut the edge of the coupon so it could be scanned again and again. So the live database is very important for that consistency and quality control. And we also capture covariates at the end of the survey on potential nominations. So not only we know these 3 individuals that we will interview afterwards, but we also know these other individuals that were not selected. So we can also know the individuals that we will not interview, but we know their names and we know they are in, for example, homeless situation. A little bit on the data collection software. I leave you the link and a QR code here if you want to check it out, and a web post on how NORC used respondent-driven sampling with Survey CTO. The Survey CTO adapted some of their protocols and the way the data is collected, so we can include this live database, QR codes, and everything for our projects. So that's RDS in a nutshell. So now I want to tell you what about the plus in the RDS plus that I started in my first slide. So what about the plus in RDS plus? Sometimes RDS is called link tracing sampling. So that's what I'm mentioning here as RDS plus. Link tracing sampling exploits additional personal information to better capture the network. So not only what I have shown you with the RDS, we will exploit more information because we have some more information about the network. We can use the personal identification data of the non-selected nominees. So those individuals the tablet did not select, we know something about them. We know their names, or we know their telephone number. We know something. So we can do a data linkage and observe the connections of individuals we did not select and we did not interview. So we can have a better idea of the network and we can use it for our estimation. And we may also allow recapture. So individuals may come more than once and fill an interview more than once, fill a survey more than once. So if individuals are nominated through different branches, they can come and fill the survey again. And if you get it, if you get the idea here is that they are being recaptured. So here it's where we combine RDS with mark recapture methodology. So some of the advantage of doing link tracing over classic RDS. We can identify overlaps in the sample network. There are recaptures where we can combine RDS with MSE strategies of multiple system estimation. So that allows to estimate population size. A seminal estimator of the population size is this one, Frank Snyder's. And this estimator considers the quantity of links within the initial samples against the recaptures. And there are more recent estimators proposed by Hancock that use Bayesian approaches and successive sample strategies to estimate population size. So how our RDS plus would look? It would look something like this. So in this slide, this individual, the red face or pink face, it's being captured more than once. So that's how RDS approach is combined with mark recapture, looking for overlaps in the network or of the participants to estimate those, not only a prevalence of a trait, but also the size of the network. So that's what we do in our studies. So a little bit about the estimators. We're going to be very fast in this one, but this is the second estimator that was proposed, but in this literature, the Volz Hecatron estimator. You can check out the paper in 2008. It's one of the seminal estimators. It's improved after the first one, the Salganik Hecatron estimator, by a dual model. It controls for certain differential bias and effectiveness. It has 7 different assumptions, so that members are chosen independently and proportional to the network size. That relationships are symmetric. If I know you, you know me. That participants recruit at random from the individuals they know. The individuals are always participating in the study. This relates to non-response. They can be recruited more than once. That's the idea of recaptures. And that respondents accurately report their network size. How many individuals do they know? And the estimator looks a little bit like this. It's very similar to the Hurwitz-Thompson estimator for the ones that know that sampling estimator. So where here P hat is the estimated proportion of something that we want to know. For example, how many individuals in homeless situation have a mental health problem. So if this is a proportion. S is the full sample, and I is the members with some traits that we want to estimate. And we are weighting everything by D, and D is the self-reported degree, self-reported network degree. How many individuals do you know? So if you know a lot of individuals, maybe you won't have a very big weight because you were easy to capture. But if you don't know many individuals, you were hard to capture, so you will weight a lot. Your weight will be very high when we compute the estimate. Guyland Hancock in 2010, they have a study that showed several weaknesses of this estimator due to unrealistic assumptions, and that's what the literature has been moving to expand on this type of estimator. So a more recent one is the Thompson 2020 estimator. It's a recent one that exploits not only the degree, but it exploits the topology of the network, like the shape of the network and the connections in the network, and how we design our survey. So results of simulation have shown that this estimator is better in decreasing the mean square error, and the bias tends to 0 in the long run. And here the inclusion probability not depends only on the degree, how many people do I know, but also in the position on the network. Where are you located on all the sampled individuals? So the main idea for this is that we use the topology of that network to relax some of the assumptions. So we can now consider sampling without replacement or no. We can consider the limited branching. You were only able to mention 2 other individuals. And for that, we will resample from our network. So we have a sample network, and we will use iterative resample to count the number of times you appear in these simulated networks. And with that, we will construct the estimator. So I don't want to take a lot of time on this one, but I want to present how the estimator look. So some of the assumption for this is that the resampling methods match the real sample. We will resample from the people we have interviewed to simulate different networks. That resample probability is proportional to the real inclusion probability. So, and how we approximate this inclusion probability to the number of times you appear in those resampled networks. And in probability, this will tend to the real frequencies. So if this assumption holds, then we can compute this estimator that it's similar again to the Horvitz-Thompson. So we are dividing, but now it's not the self-reported degree, it's the frequency, the number of times you appear in the simulated networks. So that will give us an unbiased estimator if all these assumptions hold. Okay, so that was more on the theoretical side that I wanted to present. Those are the methods, the 3 main methods. So I want to show you more now on the applied side. How do we use RDS to study hard-to-reach population? So first, it's an idea of what types of populations can be studied with RDS, for example. Hecatron 1997, one of the early papers, drug injectors in the USA. Johnson and co-authors, drug injectors, sex workers, men who have sex with men, migrants in Morocco. Salganik and co-authors, jazz musicians in New York. This is one fun paper. It's a population that not classic population study by these methods. Robino and co-authors, HIV prevalence in Brazil, and Vincent, Zhang, and Dang, sex workers in India. So you see variety of individuals, variety of groups that are studied with these methods. So sampling in practice, how we sample our respondents in our NORC studies. This was all the theoretical part. The fieldwork has a lot of challenge. So when we take these theoretical estimators to the field, you may be thinking, okay, how we do the coupons, how we put the tablet for that, how we track these individuals, how we get the personal information. So those are a lot of challenges that happen logistically in the field. So how we do this? Complementarily to contact information from NGOs, public sector, our sampling methodology usually starts with a time location sampling. So before going to the field, we usually do a formative assessments, and we start knowing the territory, the individuals, the stakeholders, try to get some seeds from that part, how many individuals in this population you know. So we start contacting them, checking some traits, checking if they can mention other individuals. So that will be our first seed. But we usually do a time location sampling. So we go to some of the venues that this population usually go to try to catch some of these individuals to use them as seed. So we select locations where individuals from the target population tend to congregate. If we're thinking, for example, in mining population, miners, they usually go to bars, to hotels, etc. in Brazil. When we're thinking of homeless population, we can think of shelters, of places where they donate clothes, food, etc. And establish different times where they will visit. So we go to different venues and at different moments of the day and different days of the week. So we have we try to cover all the seasonality that could happen there. And at this location, we will interview the seats. So those will be our convenience sample. That's how we start. And then to those seats, we will ask them to refer to someone else. So each successful seat interview for us will nominate up to 7 individuals. We tell them for the mining population, for example, we said, okay, could you mention us of 7 other individuals that you know that have worked in the mining sector in this state? And for that, from those 7 individuals, the software automatically and randomly will select 3. So we have 7 nominees and 3 referrals. The numerators then will give coupons assigned to each referral. The coupon will have the name of the selected referral. So if the tablet selected individual Jose, you will have the coupon that said, this coupon is for Mr. Jose, blah, blah, blah. So you have to give that coupon to Jose, and that coupon will be activated in our live database. So our database would say, okay, the respondent Angelo mentioned this referral that was selected by the tablet Jose. So this coupon could only be retrieved by an individual named Jose, that when he comes to us, he has to say that he knows the previous individual Angelo. So that's how we activate the codes in the database. And this follow-up service is what we call the WAVE service. So the local firm that we have in the fieldwork will screen the WAVE interview and organize this interview based on the team's location until the desired sample size is reached. So these individuals will come to us. That's a little different from traditional samples where we, for example, go knocking doors and asking for a survey, to fill a survey. Here, the potential respondent will come to us, will try to contact us to fill the survey. And then we do some work trying to recapture the ones that did not contact us. So a little bit of the fieldwork. How do we explain this to enumerators, for example? This was part of the enumerators training we did in Brazil. So we tell them at the end of the interview, you must clearly explain the referral procedure and the eligibility criteria for this. So you will give 3 coupons to distribute up to 3 contacts that meet the eligibility criteria. For our study, the mining study in Brazil, the criteria was the referrer is at least 18 years of age or older. The referrer has worked in gold mining in the last 12 months, approximately between January and February 2023. And the referrer lives in the state of Pará. That's where our study was conducted. And the coupons looks like this. So those are the QR coupons I was mentioning. In our case for Brazil, there was plastified coupons because there was a lot of rain and water, mud, it could get dirty. So plastified coupons, a QR code. There's a numeric code in case the QR code doesn't work here. This is the incentive, 100 reais. And here is some information of the local firm that was conducting the data collection and information about the survey that it basically says that you have been invited to participate in this study with this objective. This is an anonymous, confidential study. The survey will happen at some place that is safe for you. You can contact us at this number, and here the WhatsApp logo if they wanted to contact through the WhatsApp. So the interviews for individuals that are not seats, the seats are the one we approach. Any other interview that is not seat will need a coupon to start the interview because they have been referred by someone else. So the main idea, again, 7 nominees. From these 7 nominees, the tablet will select only 3, and these 3 individuals will have each a unique coupon with a unique QR code that they will come to us to complete the survey and receive the incentive. So that's a little bit of how logistically this works. And now I want to go particularly to our project in Brazil, the forced labor in the mining sector project in Brazil. This is a project from NORC where we use RDS Plus. We use these connections of the non-selected individuals, and we allow for recapture for the estimation of the population size. So a little bit of background on this project. This is also called the Tapajós project, the river along where the mining activities are conducted. So the Tapajós River Basin in Brazil, there's a high concentration of usually informal gold mining. This is in the Amazonian rainforest. The project aims to do a data-driven and evidence-based intervention for addressing prevention, protection, and prosecution in terms of labor exploitation. And for that, the project uses context-specific research to inform the intervention design, targeting, implementation, and potential replication scaling up. So the phase 1 of this project is the one I will show you. It was comprised of 3 components. First, the formative assessment I was mentioning you. Second, an intervention development research. And third, the one I'm going to focus now, the forced labor prevalence estimation, the quantitative survey to estimate how many individuals from the mining sector in this area were in some type of forced labor condition. So, so you can imagine a little bit of why this is a hard-to-reach population. We don't have a frame, of course, informal workers in in a very, very hard context, a lot of barrier to access, remote areas. We have to travel a lot through plane and land. We have to cross a river to reach the municipalities where we were conducting the survey. Tapajós is called the Amazonian El Dorado. It looks a little bit like this. So these are some photos of the areas. You see that the work is very rustic, manual, informal, and it's a lot of contamination and exploitation of the workers. So some of the methodology, this is Brazil, the state of Pará, where Tapajós River is located. So in the state of Pará, we focus on this area, basically these 3 municipalities. And this is a zoom in how's the geography, how it looks, and where we conducted our interviews. So we just used an RDS plus sampling methodology, and we focus on 3 main municipalities in the Tapajós River Basin, Itaituba, Jacaracanga, and Miritituba. Those are the 3 where we planted the seeds, but we allowed the respondents to branch out to neighboring municipalities if that would have happened. So how we estimate the prevalence of forced labor? So we had a survey instrument, more or less classic survey instrument before the RDS specific question. So we ask about the individual background, some demographic information, some work history and conditions of the workers. And then we ask substantive questions about forced labor dimensions. For this, we have components regarding right violations, components regarding vulnerability and occupational hazards, and service priorities and protection needs that was useful for designing the intervention afterwards. So a lot of these questions are very specific to the topic. They were tailored by different studies on forced labor. And for that, we used 2 different definitions of forced labor. This is more on the topic side and on the methodological side, but going very fast. We use indicators derived from the University of Georgia's Prevalence Reduction Innovation Forum. This has been used in many countries, 6 countries, and it's currently endorsed by the funding agency of this project. But we also used specific questions that allow us to measure forced labor in using the classic Brazilian indicators that are similar, but some of them are a little different. So at the end of the survey, we can construct the 2 types of indicators, the one that allows a comparison with other countries and the one that will allow to compare with previous Brazilian estimates. So potential victims of forced labor are those who have experienced 2 or more abuses from 2 separate categories of abuses. And here's a summary of the thresholds that we use. So this is the first threshold is harsher, losing freedom or movement of freedom through surveillance, isolation, being locked in the workplace, losing freedom to communicate with friends or family, or having to perform sex acts to pay off debts. That's one of the thresholds. And the second threshold is different types of abuse during recruitment, abusive employment practice and penalties, abuses in personal life and properties, degrading working condition, debt, bondage, dependency, and violence or the threat of violence. So we have 2 different thresholds, and then we also can combine them and have a general overall figure of individuals in forced labor. So I want to show you a little bit of the findings of this study. We are also conducting a similar study now for individuals in forced labor, but in the current sector, also in Pará, in Brazil. I'm going to show you the findings of forced labor in gold mining. So this is how our network looks. The left network shows the individuals we recruited and other individuals that were recruited through the respondents. The green nodes are the seats, and the yellow nodes are the referrals, so individuals mentioned by other individuals. As you can see, there are some dead nodes, so individuals or seats that were not productive. They didn't mention anybody else in the network. They didn't want to disclose any information. They didn't knew anybody else in the network. And this is how each branch, each of the arms starts branching, or each of the nodes starts branching and referring different individuals. So our final sample comprised 863 interviews, completed interviews. 183 were seats. Those are the ones we planted. There's convenient sample in different areas, the 3 municipalities, urban, rural, trying to get different age cohorts, etc., etc. And those seats referred 683 other individuals with the criteria we included. So working 18 years or older, working in the mining sector in the last 12 months, and that speak Portuguese, of course. So we estimate that the minor population sums up to 4,550 individuals. This is our confidence interval. So this is one of the results we have, the estimation of the size of the network. So it's the estimation of the size of the network in those 3 municipalities. So a little bit of our sample and our sample profile. We obtained 91% of the individuals were male. The average age is 43 years old. Most miners started working since they were 20 years old. 67% are multiracial. That's the race and ethnicity types of question that usually the categories used in Brazil. And 79% of them were literate. A little bit on the work schedule. They work around 13 hours per day, and they work more than 6 days per week. Some of the findings of the prevalence estimation, those are some characteristics of the sample. Now the main result is the estimation of the of the forced labor. So overall, using thresholds and the criteria that we included, 40% of the target population that we interviewed and that we tried to estimate a representative number, not only for the sample ones, but something that adds to the whole population of miners in that area. From those, we can say that 40% of the target population are potential victims of some type of trafficking in person for forced labor. So it's a very high number. From them, we see 57% of them suffer some type of deceptive recruitment in the target population. So they reported their current job duties were different from what they have been told. 40% reported being charged inflated price for good purchases from their employers. Many times they have to buy directly from their employees because they are in remote areas working for many days. And about 23% of them report being surveilled during their work duties. A little more disaggregation about this. There was physical abuse. 5% reported experience of physical abuse against themselves, and 26% physical abuse against someone they cared about. 47% of them report receiving threats from their employers that involve blackmail, exclusion from future employment opportunities, or even harm to loved ones. 46% of them were seriously injured at some times of work, and 1 out of 4 continue to suffer pain and other physical problems from those injuries. Almost 43% of them acquired different wound infections while working in the mine. There's very few ideal conditions in there, not very ideal to the work they do. The occupational risks of injuries were most likely to be associated with the machinery transport, big machines in the rainforest, dismantling the hydraulic systems and clearing the area before starting the mining work. 60% of the population in that region had to provide their own personal protective equipment for the job, so there was not security for the type of tasks they were doing. And about half of the population reported some symptoms of anxiety and some symptoms of depression. So that shows the really vulnerable situation, marginalized situation of this type of individuals that we're seeing in this study. So 6 takeaways from this presentation. I want to wrap up this hour. I have been talking with 6 takeaways from the hard to reach or hard to survey population. Sorry, I'm gonna see this one. Hard to survey population methodology, or a specific method for miners in Brazil. So we have seen there are different types of hard to survey populations. There are different challenges for different groups that could be survey that we could have the interest of understanding what's happening or use information for getting better public policy for them. Hard to reach is one of them, and it's characterized by being difficult to contact, difficult to identify, or having barriers to access. There are complementary techniques that we can develop to study population size and population prevalence of some trait that we are interested. For example, NSUM, network scale-up method, mark recapture or multiple system estimation, and RDS, respondent-driven sampling, and its extensions, RDS plus, link tracing sampling. RDS, or respondent-driven sampling, approximates a probabilistic sampling using the chain of referrals and introducing the randomization in there. So there are several estimators available. So we start with a convenience sample and non-probability sampling, and then we go through subsequent waves so we can approximate a sampling wave that we can use as if we would have done a traditional sampling. There are extensions for the RDS that we call RDS plus, for example, allowing recaptures that combines MSE with RDS and exploiting the personal identification data of the non-respondents, of people that were not selected by the tablets, but we know something about them, to better map the whole network. For our project, the Tapajós project, we use an RDS plus design to study forced labor in the Brazilian mining sector. We found the overall estimate is that 40% of miners are potential victims of trafficking in persons, particularly forced labor situation. And RDS design can be applied to other hard-to-reach populations, as I was showing you some of the tables. For example, immigrants, sex workers, men who have sex with men, jazz musicians, etc. So that's the wrap-up of the presentation. Thanks a lot for having me here. Now we may reserve some time for questions, for discussion. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Angelo. It was a very clear and interesting presentation, and with a great mix of theory, logistics, secrets, and practical information. And also thanks for sharing some of the findings of this important and interesting project you are conducting in Brazil with the miners. I think this is a very important matter, how to give voice to the underrepresented. It's essential really for our mission as public opinion researchers. Thanks a lot for that. We have quite a lot of questions and very to the point questions. First, we have here, Caroline is asking if you can speak about managing operations of an RDS survey, tips on how to estimate time needed for the fieldwork and finding consistent interview location in non-permissive environments.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I'm more on the methodological side than the statistics side, but let me try to give an answer to that one. There are people more experienced than NORC managing the fieldwork, but it's always a challenge. And I see another question of how you estimate the number of individuals you will need. There's a couple of papers. There's one particular I'm thinking of, then maybe I can send it if somebody's interested, that it approximates the sample size calculation. So like in the traditional sampling literature, you usually calculate sample size needs for an accurate estimate. There's one approximation that it's now in a paper for the RDS. But yeah, logistics in all this setting, it's very hard. Things move very fast. Things need to be adapted in the field. And we start with a plan and the plan starts falling down, and then we need to reconstruct and move, etc. So for example, in the Tapajós project, we wanted to collect individuals in the urban and rural areas. In rural areas, they were very far away. So in the formative assessment, we went a couple of times to the rural areas. And what we saw there is that individuals were in a very, very marginalized situation. They didn't have phones or any other way to contact them afterwards. And they didn't want to mention any other individual working in mining. So that's what we will call in the jargon a dead seat. So those individuals would not be useful to expand the network. So those were important to have because they are part of the network and they may have different traits to the other side of the network, the urban population or the not so vulnerable ones. So it's important to have them, but we knew that those seats were dead seats. They were not going to allow the network to grow. So for that, we had to allocate some extra time for them, make an additional effort to contact them, to have them in our sample. And for the Tapajós case, we were a little lucky with that because Brazil had elections of President Lula, and he made some very fast decisions against fighting the illegal mining and the exploitation in the mining sector. So there were a lot of police and military in those areas. So a lot of the population that was further away in the mines and working in the mines, they went to the population centers. So they were easy. That was easy, an easy way to capture them, to make that the process of moving the coupons becomes faster. So you usually estimate your fieldwork given with your formative assessment stage. For this, if I recall correctly, we allowed 2 months for everything to happen. There's also some tricky parts in the branching. So we don't want that branches move very different, because if some of the individuals are very productive in getting all the referrals, our network may go to one side of our branch may go to one side of the network, and we may not capture everything. So we want the waves to go smoothly and more or less in the same time. So what we did is like, okay, this week we allow to plant in the seeds. Next 2 weeks would be for wave 1. And if the seeds are super productive, okay, you selected my friend, he's right here, I will tell him, say, no, wait, we will collect their information next week. So we stop a little bit the branches that are too productive, too fast to move, and we try to accelerate or push a little more the ones that are slower. For the tricky part here in the logistics is that we need to wait for them to contact us. So then the incentives is very important in there. You need to figure out what would be a right incentive. You need local information from that, people that has experience doing service in the area with different populations similar to the one you're investigating. But also you can try to follow up the non-respondents, because you have the information. We have the information of the individuals that were referred. So for example, they interview me and I mention some other person in the mining sector, I don't know, Mr. Jose. Mr. Jose is not coming. I'm waiting the second week. He's not coming. He's wave 1. I need to complete my wave 1 service. So I will try to call her or call him. Or I will try to call the seat that referred to that individual. So I will try to call him and say, please, this individual has not come. Could you tell him again about our study? We can give an additional incentive to you or to him, etc. So in that sense, that's why I was telling this. It's a little bit like an adaptive type of sampling, where we try to make that our network doesn't go biased to one side or to the other. We are consistently checking and doing data quality assessments on the data that it's being uploaded. So we try to not be biased in that way. Does that help with the fieldwork question?
Yeah. Thanks, Angelo. Claire Duran wants to voice a question. Please, Claire. Are you there, Claire?
Yes, I'm there, but I did not raise. Oh, I have my hand raised. I didn't want to raise my hand. Sorry.
Okay. No, that doesn't matter. It's nice that you are there. We have a question from Timothy Van Blarcom. He is asking if you have any recommendations for R packages to handle these types of analysis.
Yeah, there's a couple of R packages that does that. I don't recall the name, but it's I think it's the RDS package, the one that makes that one. And there's others for mark recapture and for Ansom. If you Google them, you will easily find them. So they have most of for the RDS package, for example, it has most of the estimators included. The Thomson 2020 is not in there because it's very new and it's coded in C. So, but you could get all the other estimates from there. It's a very, very good place to start knowing about this literature, these methods to practice, because they have mock-up data, they have sample data. So you could use that one to see how the estimates vary from one estimator to the other, how the assumption makes everything changes, and so on. So for RDS, I would suggest the RDS package in R.
Thanks. We have another question also regarding RDS, which is when and how are you sure that your sample, which arises from a non-representative sample of seeds, now represents the target population?
The big question. You're never sure. You're never sure with a traditional sample either. So with a traditional sampling method, you rely on having a random sampling and design estimators that will use the classic theorems, TLC or central limit theorem and so on, that will, and the limit will approach to the parameter, no? To the population parameter. So for those traditional samples, you have the big advantage that you are not making an assumption, because design-based estimators don't need an assumption, particularly Horvitz-Thompson estimator don't need assumptions. So those are the advantages. Given that we don't have a sampling frame, we need to start with a convenience sample and a non-probabilistic sample. So if we start with a non-probabilistic sample, we need to make some assumptions. So those are the assumptions I was presenting to you in different estimators. So what the theory says, and you can check that one in the seminal papers of Hecatron or in the Thompson 2020 papers, it's that when the number of waves increases and it tends to infinity, your sample do not depend on the initial seeds. So your sample at the end becomes representative or accurate for estimated your population parameter, despite the seeds you selected at the start. So that's the advantage of making a non-probabilistic sampling a pseudo-probabilistic sampling. So it doesn't matter who were your initial seeds, you will converge to the population parameter if you believe in this assumption.
Thanks. Another to the point question, if you can't answer it now, there's no problem at all. When using mark recapture, can you tell us more about how the 2+ samples, if two separate samples of 1,000 people identify 20 people from the target population and they have an overlap of 5 people, what is the estimate of the target population?
Well, you will need to use the package to estimate it. I cannot estimate it now on the fly, but the idea is you have different lists of individuals. So if you have, I see there's another question, what's the advantage of having more than one or two lists, more than two lists, is that you may have more recapture opportunities and you have a bigger sample size at the end. So what you want to check is the overlapping of those. So the package will do that for you, the mark recapture package. So you just need to make sure individuals are the same. That's a little tricky sometimes with personal information or name, sex, date of birth. Sometimes you have to use fuzzy matching, imperfect matching, make some consideration. Okay, this guy is named Angel and this is Angelo. So maybe this is the same guy because they have the same age and then same month of birth. So you make those assumptions, and with that you consider someone an overlap or no, and you will compute the mark recapture estimator you want. There are different estimator in the MSc literature. So it's same as in RDS. You can use different ones. You can include, for example, open, closed populations. That's one of the details I was mentioning. You can consider migration, non-migration, people moving outside your area, your catchment area. You can consider that the lists come from different quality and include some different adjustment for the quality of the lists, the types of list heterogeneity models. But yeah, all of that it's in the package, so you can try to do that.
Thanks. Teresa De Bastiani wants to know about the interviewers, how you prepare them for interviews with this type of audience, which is the profile of the interviewers that you use. Do they have a lot of training on extra training on recruiting or motivating?
6 days of full training. We conducted 6 days of 8 hours, like a full work schedule. So for this project specifically, and that's mostly in most of NORC's RDS project, we have a local firm. We have a people that is specialized in the topic. In this one, we had a very good local firm with enumerators that they all had higher education. They were all bachelors, even we had 1 or 2 master's degree level enumerators, and one doing their PhD about mining in Brazil. That was the field coordinator. So he was the one doing the first contact with the village leader, asking for permission. This area is also very complex. There's a lot of danger for individuals that are not local, that don't know how the culture works in there. And there's a lot of stakes in play, a lot of gold specifically, you know? So for this case, we did a 6 days training with the numerators team. We had a week before, there was a supervisor's training. I was in the numerators training. A week before was another colleague from NORC. He conducted the supervisor's training. We had, if I recall correctly, 6 supervisors and 20 enumerators. Both teams conducted interviews. The supervisor had more power to decide what to do, where to go. They went into teams, never alone. More than one individual from the staff would go there. They moved together and they moved to different areas at the same time. We also had 4 pickup vans or trucks, so we could go through the mud and through the difficult terrain to go from one area to the other. So the area is very hard. It takes from the closest city that you could fly to, that it was Santarém. We had to go 8 hours through dirt road to reach Itaituba. That was mostly the headquarters of the local firms. It was one of the hotels in there. That's where we conducted the training for all of them. So on those 6 days, half of those days we do the classical survey training, like how to ask questions, how not to bias the respondent, how to use the tablet. That's very important. We pilot the questionnaire with some individuals to see that the people understand the question, that there's a good phrasing, that the skip patterns are working correctly, that the categories are all in them. And then that takes a lot of time because you always find errors, you always find a word that is not used in that area. So some of the numerators many of the numerators get a lot of feedback on, okay, we should change this word. People don't use this word, they use this other word, and blah, blah, blah. And then we also include, that's the traditional training for service. We also include modules about working with vulnerable population, working with individuals in a marginalized situation, what to do if you face some safety concerns, what to do if the individual asks you for help. So we call it the trauma-informed research training. So we have a specialized model for that. So the enumerators and all the staff in general are prepared to handle difficult situations. In our case, all the enumerators were local, were Brazilians. Many of them were from the area, so they have a very good knowledge on what they could see, what they would see, what they would expect from the study.
Thanks, Angelo. That was a very detailed response. Mike Lewis is curious about knowing if the administrative the estimate from the gold mining industry, the administrative government administration agrees with your population estimate. Does the government have some estimate that you can match with?
I think the government estimates, I may be wrong here, they have a broader estimate, like gold mining industry, but for the whole Pará or some areas of Pará. With that, we are specifically in 3 municipalities, so maybe that's why the estimates can differ a little bit. And if you see the estimates of the population size have big confidence intervals, that's one of the one of the caveats you may have with these types of analysis, because you rely on Bayesian methods that they need a lot of samples, a lot of observations to converge to a closer or narrower confidence interval. But yeah, maybe if you see any difference from the gold mining industry big estimates to what we are estimating here, it could be due to difference in how we are defining our population. We are including mostly informal and registered workers in the mining sector. So most of them are not tracked by the administrative data that tracks formal workers. And the other is that we're focusing in 3 municipalities.
Thanks. Colin Irwin, hi. He's mentioning that he had to survey the Inuit in the Canadian Arctic, but could not survey all the communities. So he surveyed a typical small isolated community and a representative larger regional hub community and interpolated to the Canadian Arctic as a whole with metadata. He's asking, could you do this in Brazil and or as a general method for widely distributed populations that are hard to reach?
I would be interested to know more on the method. I cannot say yes or no now, but yeah, if you're interpolating, you need to make a lot of assumptions, no? Like that population you know looks the same as the population you don't know. So I don't know much about what you did in that project. It looks very interesting. It definitely is a hard to reach population, no, for the one you mentioned, but I won't be able to say yes or no for this case. I don't know that method.
Okay, Colin, if you're there and want to just speak out, please do so. Teresa De Bastiani is asking, how can we convince respondents from this type of public to take part? Incentives don't seem to be enough, especially in delicate situations such as forced labor. Do you have any other arguments apart from incentives, Angelo?
It worked very good for us. In our case, it was not so hard to reach them with the incentives. So in different situations, for example, we have had to switch the incentives instead of money to be in-kind transfers. So for example, and also depends on the IRB and on all of that. But I would say that incentives work very good in all the projects we have been doing with RDS. We have several projects about this at NORC. Money transfers or in cash or in kind. And also, a very important part is to ensure trust and confidentiality, that they don't need to reveal their the CPF is like the social security number of Brazil. They don't need to reveal their real name. If they don't want, they can give us a nickname. If they don't want to answer any question, they can skip it. They can pause at any time. We can meet them on some other area so they don't face any problems with the employer. So all those types of security concerns could be addressed. There's another research we're doing in Argentina for the garment sector. It's more on the urban side. It's forced labor in the urban sector. So we had a lot of these issues coming there because we were in big areas where there's a lot of trading, commerce, stores like La Salada. So sometimes we have to move to another area or reach these individuals after they were working, because they say, I don't want that anybody seeing me answering questions to someone about what's my working situation, condition, etc. You know? So that's you have to take a lot of that in consideration. That's why you need the formative assessment stage, and what having local firms, local staff is very, very important.
Thanks, Angelo. We have a Christopher Aisier from Nigeria. He is asking, how can we validate the data collected from the hard-to-reach population when looking at collecting data from people who are mentally retarded? Do you have any experience or comment regarding hard-to-reach population and mentally retarded people?
I don't understand very good the question, but I think that from what I put in the first slide, it was that, for example, people with some mental disability would be hard to interview, no, instead of hard to reach. Maybe you have a sampling frame for individuals with that type of condition. Some countries you have some social policy programs that attend this population, so you may have a list of those individuals. You may have an idea where they are. So you could conduct a traditional sampling design that doesn't require RDS, NSUM, or market capture, whatever, but you will have to tailor your interview a lot for that one. So that's another type of challenge, because those are hard to interview instead of hard to reach. It could be both too. So, but hard to interview will have another caveat. So.
Interesting. What methodological suggestion can you make about sampling or recruitment of migrants in transit? Resources you know of would be also great. Thanks for your thoughts, says one participant.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I would say that for those type of population, hard if you do like an RDS in the one we did for Brazil, it would have to move very fast, right? Because if you move the coupon, the other migrant is in transit by the definition of the population, so they may be moving and say, well, I cannot give the coupon to this individual because he already left. He crossed the border. He's at another side. I don't know where he is, etc. So wild ideas that I'm thinking now, you could allow different modes of your interview. So not only face-to-face, but also telephone interviews. We have been doing that in Argentina, for example, and we tried a little bit in Brazil, but where it was not very needed, where you send the coupon through WhatsApp or through email or any other system that they use, but we use WhatsApp. So the coupon is a QR code, so you can have the QR code virtually, and you can tell the respondents, okay, can you mention another migrant that you know it's in transit, it's moving, I know maybe you don't physically see them, but can you send this coupon through the WhatsApp, and we can have a phone interview maybe. So that could be one option, like to combine face-to-face with other modes of collecting the data. For example, telephone interviews, web interviews, etc. So that would put some caveats on the literature of mode effects. So when you combine face-to-face with mode, you have to be a little bit careful for that one. That's one thought. You could combine modes, and you could use telephone to send the coupons and all of that. The other is that you may know the main transit areas from those individuals. So if you have a enumerators team, you could send those enumerators team to do some type of mark recapture in those areas. If you know where the individuals are crossing the border by, or the station, the migration station where they get checked by the police and all of that, you could put your interviewers there, and you could do the mark recapture in there. Try to capture them here, and then try to capture them inside the first town that you see. Another way would be to do some time location sampling. So some ideas that may be useful.
Thanks, Angelo. Well, we are arriving to the end of our webinar. We want to be respectful of times. We have a lot more questions that we won't be able to answer today, and a lot of comments, Angelo, a lot of congratulations on your presentations. We need to stress that we will have a video recording sent to everyone who has signed in for the webinar. So you will have a chance to review the material again, and you have there Angelo's contact details in case you want to contact him. Please stay in tune for our next webinars, which are in November the 16th. We have gridded population sampling by Data Thompson and Dale Roda. And then in the 15th of December, we have another webinar on how to think about visualizing data by Kieran Healy. So please stay tuned for that information. Thanks to everyone who has participated, especially Angelo. Thanks a lot. Very clear and very, very, really interesting and useful. Thanks to all.
Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for being here.
Bye.